right, here comes the trouble. Oh my goodness. The three amigos. I don't know about you three sitting together. All right, are y'all ready to get into Daniel? I hope that you get excited about Daniel. Of course, I hope you get excited about any book of the Bible, but especially Daniel. And I'm trying to really take my time and slow down and go. Yeah, we're working on our lighting. We're putting some new lights in, and of course, we found a dark spot. But we're moved into we've moved into LED world. So now you can see to take notes. All right, it will. With my loudness and are we live, Josh? Everybody on? All right. Here comes the old men now. We can get started. All right, so we're studying Daniel. We're going to be starting Daniel chapter 2 tonight. If you want to go ahead and open your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2, we're going to try to do verses 1 through 11. There's some themes I need you to keep remembering as we go through here. One, we're seeing the sovereignty of God in all of the Bible, right? Amazing, and you're going to see some amazing things in the book of Daniel. And here we know that God, last week, the first few weeks, studying that Daniel, is a part of this, what they call a deportation. Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians have went into Jerusalem and kidnapped the best boys they got and brought them back over to his kingdom. And he's trained them for 3 years in all of their Babylonian ways. And he wants these boys, when they go back and get the rest of the Jews and take over them and conquer them and bring them back to Babylon to be their slaves or whatever they want them to be, these boys are going to be the ones to show them and lead them into Chaldean or Babylonian ways. So God has set his man in place. Nebuchadnezzar may be thinking that I'm the most powerful. I've won. I've conquered Daniel. But look what God is doing. God's in control of all of it. And that's one of the main things we see in the Bible. Even though man may think he's in control, we know what? God is always in control. We may think we're in control of and you know what? The power of the will of man, the free will of man, we can do whatever we want to do, right? Now, there's consequences for that. We can get up, but we have the will to do what we want to do, but God is sovereignly in control of all of that. And I've explained to y'all about the will often, many times, so I won't get into that tonight. But Daniel and these three friends, after their 3 years of training, they stood out over all the other boys. In fact, the Bible said last week that they were 10 times better. So that after their training in their Jewish homes, being the noble princes, and how they grew up in the strictness of the Jewish customs and the law, they knew the Bible, they knew the Scriptures. Now they're trained in pagan ways, Babylonian ways. These boys are 10 times better than any of the rest of them. In fact, they're 10 times smarter than any of the wisest men that Nebuchadnezzar had already accumulated around him. Now, jot this note down as we start moving forward. This is very important. Always see the spiritual lesson, and there's literal physical lessons, okay? A lot of people get confused, and they think, well, it's either literal or it's spiritual only. And it can be both. You might have heard me teach you on what we call premillennialism, amillennialism, and postmillennialism, okay? We at this church are premillennialism. If you just went through the Revelation study with Scott Rush, you remember him talking about that. Amillennial people, they look at all the end times, Daniel, Revelation 20, they look at a lot of this and they see it's only a spiritual symbolism. It's not literal. Hence the in the Greek language, means no or nil. So it's no millennial kingdom. They don't believe in a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth, even though the Scripture says. So the reason I'm bringing that up to you, just a little example, is I want you to learn to see the spiritual lessons and the literal lessons, okay? This is literally happening in 605, now 602 BC, okay? It literally happened. It was real. It's not a figment of somebody's imagination. Now, one of the ways that God communicates to men. He communicates to us in a variety of ways through the beginning of time, what I call dispensations of time. He communicated with Adam. Remember last week I told you in the cool of the morning in the garden he walked with him. And then to Noah and to Moses and on down the line. And now he's communicating, as we're going to see tonight, through dreams. And last week I told you there's a difference between dreams and vision. Dreams are always when what? You're asleep. And visions are when you're awake. And that's just a theological difference you need to understand. So, but God is communicating through dreams. In fact, as some guy looked this up, I found on my searching here, 21 in the Bible, that he found 21 dreams that God worked through. 6 of those dreams were through kings. 1 of the dreams was through a woman, and 2 through different men named Joseph. So those are your 9 different people that God worked through dreams, not visions. And some examples you might remember in your Old Testament studies. Remember Abimelech when Sarah and Abraham came in and they lied. He lied about it and said, "That's my sister." And Abimelech got that dream, said, "Don't go be with her." And he didn't. And so that was an example. Jacob's ladder. You remember that dream? You remember the dream where God tells Jacob to go home? The dream with Laban, warning Laban. The dream, Joseph's dreams. Remember those? And then Pharaoh's dreams. Solomon, the Magi that we just talked about, and Joseph, and back here with the birth of Jesus. So tonight we're going to look at another dream, one of the kings, Nebuchadnezzar, his dream, and then ultimately we'll get to Daniel's dreams. But this is good stuff, so hang on tonight. Daniel chapter 2. So it starts off and it tells us, now in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Now, we know that at 605 BC is when Nebuchadnezzar went into Jerusalem, and he took these Jewish boys captive. And he trained them for 3 years. Why is it saying in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar? And there's see, skeptics will come at you with that. There's an explanation. We've already kind of given you an explanation in the beginning. We talked about in the 1st year of the reign of Jehoiakim. Remember that? Well, Babylonians, with their kings, they would not look at the first reign, the 1st year. It was only in the 2nd year that they would, and they called that the 1st year. Now also, when Nebuchadnezzar, remember he was going over there fighting against the Assyrians, but his father was dying, Nabopolassar. So Nebuchadnezzar has to turn around and come back to be with his dying father. Well, his father died. The Babylonians would go ahead and count Nabopolassar's reign to the end of that year. So Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't get to claim those few months or whatever it was since Nabopolassar died as his 1st year. Okay? And then he wouldn't get his 1st year. So this is how you can say that, yes, this will be in the 2nd year according to Babylonian timing. Now, and that lines up with, yes, it is 3 years. So what we're seeing here in the first 2 chapters of Daniel is this is really just all happening. Boom, 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 the way Daniel's writing it. There are no large gaps, okay? Daniel's writing, hey, we were 3 years in training, and then boom. Nebuchadnezzar, last week I showed you in the end of chapter 1, Nebuchadnezzar has brought us into his service, and then boom, here tonight, the first thing that happens when we come into service, we hear that Nebuchadnezzar has had dreams. And it says that his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. And notice that it says there, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, plural. That'll become important later. Now, these dreams were so vivid to him that it troubled him. And that's a very graphic word when you look at the definition of that. It really troubled him. And his sleep left him, meaning he couldn't go back to sleep. How many of y'all, when you have bad dreams, you just roll back over and go back to sleep, right? Well, maybe some of you don't, but some of you do. When I'm flying, my dream, when I'm always flying, I can flap my wings and I can make myself fly, and I'm good until I'm starting to fall. But I learned over the years, over the past 40-something years since I've had this dream, I don't fall anymore. I've learned how to just kind of glide. Am I alone? Do y'all not have these flying dreams? Yeah. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar's had dreams, and it's troubled him. Look at verse 2. It says, then the king gave orders to call in the magicians. the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. Now, young people and all, listen to me. Notice some of these names here: magicians, conjurers, sorcerers. Guys, this is back in 602 BC. We're still dealing with people. What are they trying to mainly sell out there today? You got horoscopes and read your signs, and everybody's wanting, all this stuff. It's still around. Satan ain't had to change his game too much, has he? He's still using the same things. But the king gave orders for all of these are his intellectuals, his wise men, those that are in the service of the king, which Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have just been promoted to. But they're not up there yet, okay? They're brand new. The king has just invited them in. What's happening here, it's an all-hands-on-deck experience, okay? Now, what I picked up on this, in a good Bible study tool, is learning to really take your time looking at a verse, pulling out all you can out of a verse. He's called all of them in here, all right? And he's to tell the king his dreams. He gave orders to him to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and they stood before the king. What I'm seeing here is they've got a system here. Okay, so I started looking back at some of Babylonian history here and what was going on. It was a big deal to those people in that time about dreams. That was a big deal for them. Well, what King Nebuchadnezzar wants to know is, what do my dreams mean? What is he really after? He's wanting to know the future. He's wanting to know what's fixing to happen. You know what? People are obsessed with the future. People are so obsessed with what's going to happen. In fact, we live in a day and time right now, and I'm telling you guys, it's the big one. People are scared to death to die. They're afraid to die. You've looked at the mass chaos and the panic that hit last year. That is a fruit of that. People are afraid to die. And we've talked about this recently, and I've told you, I think that as Christians, we should not be afraid to die. Why? Because as soon as we close our eyes, we're present with the Lord. Why would you be afraid of that? It's a joyful thing. Like today I was watching the funeral service for the sweet lady I grew up with at First Baptist, the pastor's wife, and Miss Faye Edwards. And, I even found myself teary-eyed listening to the service, but it wasn't tears of grief, it was tears of joy. Like, I got to thinking, Miss Faye, all my life, I watched her, have to walk because she had polio and she had that short leg. Can you imagine being a little boy watching a woman? I mean, we all stared at her. But I grew up learning how sweet and how much she loved us and how important she was to the church. And I sat there thinking about, she's not limping. She's walking in heaven, and she's happy. She's been waiting for 81 years to get to see her Lord Jesus. And I sit there and I started to just, weep a little bit about in happiness for her. And that's the way we as Christians should be. Now, I'm a little, I ain't gonna lie, I'm a little concerned about how I might die. I don't want to burn or fall off a building or, drown or, be shot in the face. And, there's some things that I don't really want to die. And I know y'all are human too. That's a weird one. I can't help it. When I was in law enforcement, I didn't mind being shot. I just didn't want to be shot in the face. I mean, look at this, Wade. How could you? Yeah. But people get so obsessed with the future, and they get so obsessed with things that are coming. I mean, look at the conspiracy theories. There's been so many, and I'll be honest with you, when 30 years ago when I was at Austin Peay, I just knew that the Muslims were fixing to take us over and slaughter us all. I believed it. I mean, I looked down through the past 30 years since I started college, and I'm thinking about all the different conspiracy theories that I've heard, and they come and go. How many? You remember what started the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the cult? They said, they predicted when Jesus was going to return. That guy did. They of course, they had to change their thing and say, well, really, he just made a different atonement. He's got a different, it gets weird what they created. But people have always tried to predict when Jesus is coming back. They're always trying to tell the future. This is still in the minds of these people back then. He wants to know what these dreams mean because he wants to know what's coming. And so look at verse 3. The king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Now, as I just mentioned to you before, the Babylonians, Chaldeans, in the southern part of Babylonia, they were big into dreams. they would record people's dreams, I read. And then they would, if a man gave a dream, they would record it, write it down, and then they watched that man's life and how he died. So that if anybody, and they did that for a long period of time, so that when somebody had a similar dream, they could go to their books, they had massive books they kept up, and they could find that dream and say, oh, you know, Wanda, you had this dream, so this is what's going to happen to you in the future. You know, that's what they got into, and they recorded all of their dreams. And they could tell them what their future was going to be. Look at verse 4. It says, the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Oh, king, live forever. That's just, you see that all the time. Anytime you come before a king, that's what they say. It's just a standard thing to stand before the king. Oh, king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. Now, I got to get a little deep with you for a second to make sure you understand something. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Okay, from here on, from this verse, all the way through chapter 7, in verse 28, that whole section that we're going to be reading is written in Aramaic. Why was it written in Aramaic? Aramaic was the common language in the Babylonian Empire. Okay, now during the time that Jesus comes on the scene, when Jesus was in Palestine, remember Jesus stayed in that area of Palestine. Well, I got so many things. I just want to start chasing rabbits and just tell you so many things. I can't help it. But Jesus spoke in Aramaic. You know that Jesus didn't walk around speaking in Greek, okay? He spoke in Aramaic, and they wrote down the things that he said in Koine Greek. But Jesus spoke in Aramaic. This comes back. This was an old language that they spoke in the Babylonian Empire, too. Now, of course, Jesus knew the Hebrew language, but they didn't speak the Hebrew language out into the public, okay? That was mainly in their homes and in the temple service. Now, in the 400 years between Malachi and the birth of Christ, Greek became the most popular language. Why is that? Because remember, Alexander the Great comes in, and he conquers, and so Greek become the most dominant language in the world. Now, during this time, when is when the Septuagint come in. Y'all heard me talk about the Septuagint. You might see a symbol of a LXX. That means, some of you students here, remember that? In Roman, what is that, Alicia? LXX. What's that count to? 70. Right? All right, it means 70. And that's where that comes from. They had 70 scholars that worked on the translation. When you hear about the Septuagint, this was the ancient Hebrew scrolls that were translated into Greek. Jesus and the apostles would often quote from the Septuagint. Okay? They didn't always quote from the Hebrew text. They would quote from the Greek text that was translated from the Hebrew text. And there's so much we can talk about. And I like to plant these little things in your mind because people are going to challenge you on your Bible. How do we know the canonization of Scripture? Why has the Catholics got the Apocrypha? And why do they have all these other books? What's the difference? How do we know that the 66 books are it? Well, it goes back to, for one, there's many things we can prove. One, the Jews recognized the Septuagint. Okay? Jesus recognized the Septuagint. If Jesus said it was good, it's good with me, right? That's what he recognized. They had no problem with it. The Jews had no problem with Jewish, as they become Christians, they had no problem with the 27 books that were written. They had problems with some of the other ones. They knew they weren't inspired writing. So I can get on and on with that, but I wanted you to understand that this Aramaic was just a common language in Babylonian times. Now, Daniel writes some in this book in Aramaic because he's in Babylon. If you think about the Jews being deported in and they're reading, you know, he's writing in the common language. He doesn't spend the whole 70 years in Babylon. What happens? He gets out and he gets to go back to Israel. When he goes to Israel, he writes in Hebrew again. Daniel, so he writes some of it in Hebrew and some of it in Aramaic, and we can explain that, and that's fine. But that's all that's about. It's not a big deal. We know what God had him write. We know that that this is exactly every word breathed from God. And the reason we know that, it doesn't contradict anything. There's no lies in it, right? I go over and over with that all the time. The book of Daniel is a solid book. And you're going to hear me stress on that a little bit, and I know that might get boring for some of you, but people want to discredit the book of Daniel. They want to take this book out, and you need to be able to explain some of these things. Now, let's move on to verse 5 and 6. The king replied to the Chaldeans, "The command from me is firm." Now remember what they've asked him. He said, "I've had a dream." And they said, "Well, dream, king, tell us the dream, and we'll interpret it for you." He said, "The command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation," meaning he's not telling them what the dream is. "I just had dreams, and I want you to tell me what the dreams are, and I want you to tell me what they mean." And they're like, "Well, just tell us the dream." He says, "The command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a rubbish heap. But if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore, declare to me the dream and its interpretation." So here's this king. He's got his wisest men, all his future tellers, all these people that come up with all this stuff, these intellectuals, dream interpreters. And he's showing us here that he doesn't believe that they can do it. Now, he didn't write that, did he? But that's what he's showing us. Now, does that seem fair? Hey, if you can't tell me what my dream is, if you can't read my mind and tell me what my dream is and tell me what it meant, I'm going to tear you limb from limb. And notice he says that not only am I going to rip you apart, but I'm going to tear your houses down and make them into a rubbish heap. Now, I want you to understand something. When he says a rubbish heap, what he's talking about, have you ever looked into the bottom of an outhouse? That's what he's talking about. It's a manure pile, okay, a dung pile. And this is an example. If you look on the screen, I'll have Miss Pat put up 2 Kings chapter 10:27. This was a common thing in those days that they did to people. It says, "They also broke down the sacred pillar of Baal and broke down the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day." So that was a common thing that they did to people, to make an example of them. So the king says, "If you can't tell me what my dream is and what it means, I'm going to rip you apart. I'm going to destroy you and kill you. Not only that, but I'm going to take your houses, and meaning everything that you have, your family, everybody, and I'm going to make it a latrine, the bottom of an outhouse." That's what we're going to do to you. That doesn't seem very fair, does it? Now, Nebuchadnezzar believes as he was taught from his father, Nabopolassar, and all of these Babylonians. And what they believed is, if you forgot a dream, okay, then the gods, little g gods, are going to be angry with you. So, remember I told you he also wants to know the future. So he wants to know the future, and he knows if he doesn't find out what this dream is, the gods are going to be angry with him. No telling what kind of punishment is going to come upon him. Still no different today. People want to know what to expect, okay? People live with great fear, as I said earlier, because they don't know what to expect. It may be something as simple as going into a crowd. It may be something as simple as you sharing Christ with someone. You have a fear of sharing Christ with another person. How long are you going to continue to have that fear? Because your Lord has said what? You do it. Don't be afraid don't be ashamed of the gospel, and don't be afraid. How many times did the Lord tell us do not fear, right? We've all got to learn how to overcome our fears. We don't worry about what to expect, right? We don't worry about what they're going to do or what they're going to say. We just tell them what Christ told us to. And I always like to kind of tie little examples back to us so that we understand. We all have these great fears. Everybody has fears. How many of you have ever been stressed out? Be honest. If you've been stressed out, guess what caused it? Fear. Fear is the root of all stress. Now, it may not be fear of I'm fixing to fall off a building and die, or I'm going to get cancer and die. It may be something that's the fear of embarrassment, a fear of ridicule, a fear of not passing a test or getting a job or having money or some kind of something. But fear is at the root of all of these stresses, meaning I don't know what to expect, so I'm afraid. Now, we who trust in Christ should have no fear of the future. We already know it. And I just wanted to give that, make sure you understand here the spiritual lesson that we're learning here. The Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, has a great fear of these dreams. He wants to know what to expect. He's been taught that the gods will be angry with him. He needs somebody to tell him what these dreams are, but he knows these people can't do it. Why do you even have them around you, Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar, I told you, is a smart man. He's a very wise man. He's wise enough to know that all of this is just a game. He's wise enough to know it ain't real. He's tested them, and he's seen them work. And so look at verse 7. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation. Well, it's an obvious response, isn't it? You left something out, king. You forgot to tell us what the dream is. Surely you can remember your dream. You know the gods would be angry with you. You know how important dreams are to our system. We got to write it down. You don't come at us like you don't remember. Don't tell us you don't remember. That's really what they're saying to him. King, just let us know what it is. See, if he tells them his dream, if he tells them any part of it, then they get to work their little magic, see? They get to come in here and tell you all kinds of stuff. It's like I've told y'all before about, you remember going to the fair and the people that could tell you they can read your future? You know, or people that say they can read your palm and tell your future? That's all a lie. It's satanic. Don't ever believe that stuff. None of it is real. But people fall for it all the time. You still today see palm readers. You can go up to Nashville and go and see stores, and there's a palm reader. You still see it in the newspaper, I guess, about the horoscopes. Leave the horoscopes alone. Leave the palm readers alone. You can't tell the future. Guess the only future that you're going to need to know is already recorded for you. This is the only book in all of history that tells you the future. 100% accurate. Everything else is a lie. Even Nostradamus is not 100% accurate, okay? This right here is it. There is no other reason for you to look at anything else. Well, they tell him, King, just tell us the dream and we can help you. Well, look what the king says. The king replied, I know for certain that you are bargaining for time. Inasmuch as you have seen that the command from me is firm, that if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, that I may know that you can declare to me its interpretation. Well, the king didn't budge, did he? He didn't change. You know what stood out to me? He said there in the beginning, he said, I know for certain. That's what the king told him. I know for certain you guys are bargaining for time. You're stalling. You can't read my mind. That's what he's telling them. I know that you guys can't do this. Nebuchadnezzar, I'd like to, hey buddy, you're telling the whole world. You're telling the whole world. I know you can't do this. I know you're playing games. Now remember, spiritual lesson here. Who is involved in leading Nebuchadnezzar? Satan. Satan's always involved here. This gives us a little bit of insight about what Satan can and can't do here. I want you to know something. Satan can't read your mind. He can't read your mind. He doesn't have that power. We see it right here. If Satan had that power, don't you think he would have given it to him? Yeah, but he doesn't. See what God's doing here, y'all? He's setting the stage. He's setting him up, right? Where's Daniel at? Remember when I told you in the beginning of the night? God has already set his man in place. God's already been working on this from before the foundation of the world. And Daniel is going to come on the scene. Now look at verse 10. He's telling them, you can't do this, and you have no other options. I know, you know what's fixing to happen to you. Now, so the Chaldeans answered the king and said, I love this. And look, it's the last verse we're going to look, last two verses. So y'all look at this. This is great. Look what they said. There is not a man on earth who could declare the matter for the king. And not only that, he says, inasmuch as no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this of any magician, conjurer, or Chaldean. So they're saying, look, king, they're admitting their game is up, right? They've just told, look, nobody can do this. I'd like to have been there and say, whoa, time out. What have y'all been doing up here in the king's service? What about all them books you got stacked up there where you've been writing people's dreams down and recording all this stuff? Y'all just up here living fat and happy on the king, and it's all been a lie. You can't do it. They just admitted right here for all the world to read for all time. And like I said earlier, young people, horoscopes, all this stuff, that's what they're telling you over these thousands of years ago. It ain't real. Nobody, he says here, no one, not a man on earth, could declare. Now, there's another key word in the Bible study here. Pay attention. Not a man on earth who could declare the matter for the king. Inasmuch as no great king or ruler has ever even asked anything like this. King, now they're putting the blame on him. King, you've got the problem. Nobody would ever even ask this kind of thing. You're asking us something that's unreasonable. Nobody can do it. No magician, no conjurer or Chaldean. Moreover, the thing which the king demands is difficult. And here they say it again. There is no one else who could declare it to the king except who? Gods. Now notice that's a little g, right? That's these gods they believe in. No one could interpret this dream and declare it to the king except gods, whose dwelling place is not with mortal flesh. Y'all see what's happening here, right? You already kind of know the story that's coming up, I know. But isn't it exciting? Because guess what? I'm not going to tell you what's next till next week, right? We're going to find out what's next. But you already know what's coming. What did they just admit here? Nebuchadnezzar? Only God could do something like this. And then God's going to be like, hey, here's my man. Imagine watching a play, okay? Some of you, it's been in the theater before. This is what they call the, what's it called, Emily, when you're up next? The prompt or it's a prompt, right? Isn't that what the terminology they use to give you? Hey, you're up next. The cue. Couldn't think of it. This is like you're watching a play, and the men are pleading for their life. Nebuchadnezzar, nobody can do this. Only God can do this. Cue. And here comes Daniel. And God's going to work through Daniel. So we'll get into that next week. But isn't it exciting? See what's fixing to happen? All right. Anybody have any questions, comments from last week? Anything we've studied about Daniel or anything you'd like to bring up? Or give you a few minutes.